What is the point? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is the Immortal Combat Podcast. The Immortal Combat Podcast is a podcast arm of Very Christie. Very Christie is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help men attain the full stature of Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at verychristie.com. All right, gentlemen, this is the Intro to Spiritual Life, Intro to Spiritual Theology, episode 3. The spiritual life would not be incorrect, but we're spiritual theology. All right. This week, we're going to try to answer the question, what is the point of life? What is the last end or goal of life? Remember, this month, to know the basic foundation of the moral life, okay, the moral life and spiritual life is about perfecting the human person, okay, helping us to become the man that God wants us to be. In order to understand clearly what that is, we have to know what we are and where we're going. So the last 2 weeks, we said, well, what is a human being? Soul-body composite. What sort of powers we have? We have an intellect and a will. Okay. What sort of appetites do we have? We have an appetite for pleasurable goods. That's a concupiscible appetite. And the desire for arduous goods, which is the irascible appetite. Now that we have that firmly in place, we'd say, okay, well, then what's the goal? The goal of life has a subjective and an objective side to it. Now, subjective here, I don't mean by that like subjective, like it's different for everybody. What is the meaning of life is the same for everyone. Every human has the same goal because we're all made by the same God. What I mean by subjective here is what's the point of life that resides within us? So it's in the subject. The objective goal is what object outside of us do we have to acquire in order to fulfill the subjective part? Okay. More plainly, the subjective point of life is to become happy. And happiness is in us. So everybody wants to be happy. And that's a good thing. You should embrace your desire to be happy. The question should be, what object will make you perfectly happy? This week, we're going to look at, I'm going to try to argue that happiness is what we're after. Next week, I'm going to argue that God is the only thing that can satisfy you, though I'll hint at it a little bit this week. So that's our task. All right, let's just jump in. All right, what is happiness? For Thomistic moral and spiritual theology, Thomistic moral and spiritual theology is what's called teleological. That is a fancy term which means purposeful, purposive. Okay. It means that when God made us, he makes us to pursue certain ends or goals. Okay. So it's hardwired in our system to attempt to pursue goals. All right. And the goal that we're trying to pursue is the goal of perfection, or the goal of becoming better, or the goal of being happy. So a great Catholic philosopher by the name of Brian Davis says this: people are creatures endowed with an intellect and will, like we talked about last week, and they're drawn to goals that attract them. Human actions are always a voluntary aiming for an end perceived as good. Since goodness is perfective or fulfilling, proper human action is always movement to what is fulfilling or perfecting of the agent whose movement it is. People by nature desire or are attracted to what perfects or fulfills them, and this fact is the foundation of morality. Okay, he actually is pretty clear there, but let me put him in other words. Here's the basic gist. You have an intellect and you have a will. You are attracted to things that you perceive will perfect you or make you better. Now, your perceptions can be wrong, young men, but you nonetheless are attracted to things that will make you better. So if I asked you, if it's football season, let's say you're a football player, why do you play football? Think it's going to make your life better. Why do you eat lunch? Think it's going to make my life better. Why do you do my math homework? Think it's going to make my life better. Why do you sleep at night? Think it's going to make my life better. We do things we think will make us better off. Now, notice this, if what I'm saying is correct, that would also explain our desires for sins. So if you think some sin, like, I don't know, smoking methamphetamines is going to make you happy, well, then you're going to do it. If you don't think it's going to make you happy, and spoiler alert, it doesn't. Not that I've tried it, but you don't have to try it to know it. All right. You're not going to do it. So we avoid things that we think will ruin us. We pursue things that we think are good for us. That's the basic insight. Okay. And I don't imagine any of you have any objections to that because it's pretty obvious and commonsensical. Okay. Now, let's push that thought a little bit further. So when the philosopher Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas said, okay, we are always acting for ends and things and goals that we think will make us better. One of the questions they asked was, well, what is like the ultimate goal? Okay. And they said, yeah, we pursue goals that we think are good and perfective. But what's like the one thing we want? Okay, so we all know why you brush your teeth because you don't want cavities. Why do you eat dinner? Because it's good for your health. Why do you play sports? Because it's good for your health. Why do you study? Because it makes you smarter. But they were like, no, no, no. But all of life has to have like one ultimate goal. What is that? And Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, and Jesus Christ all agree that the one goal we are after is happiness. Aristotle says this: we always desire happiness for its own sake and never as a means to something else. Whereas honor, pleasure, intelligence, and every virtue we desire partly for their own sakes, but partly also as a means to happiness, because we suppose they prove instruments of happiness. Happiness, on the other hand, nobody desires for the sake of these things, nor indeed as a means to anything else at all. Happiness is the most desirable of all things. Happiness is something final and self sufficient, the end of all action. Okay, great. Here's how obvious this is. Aristotle would say, and I agree with him, that if you ask anyone why they do what they do and you question them long enough, they will always come to the final answer that they do it to be happy. Okay. So if you ask somebody, why are you going to school? They go, oh, I hate school. Well, then why are you doing the work? Well, because I want to get my degree. Why do you want to get your degree? Because it'll help me get a job. Why do you want to get a job? Because I want to make money. Why do you want to make money? So I can buy stuff. Why do you want to buy stuff? I want to buy stuff because it makes me happy. So notice the root motivation of going to school, though the guy thinks he's going to school just to avoid getting in trouble or to get his degree, ultimately what it's after is happiness. So if you question him long enough, he's going to come to that conclusion. Aristotle, Aquinas, and Jesus agree that the number one motivator, the point of life, is to become happy. I want you men to embrace this insight wholeheartedly. I want you to run with it. I want you guys to embrace the fact that you want to be happy, period. And you should say, you know what? I do want to be happy, 100%. And God wants me to be happy. The next question that pops up is, what will make me happy? Notice the distinction I said earlier. I said we perceive things we perceive as good. Sometimes our perceptions are accurate. So if you guys eat a healthy diet and you get exercise and you do your math homework and you go to mass on Sunday because you perceive those things as being good, congratulations, they are good and they will contribute to your happiness. But notice some people perceive doing drugs, getting drunk, chasing women around as goods that will make them happy, and they are wrong. And so their perception is false. So though those things give the appearance of happiness, they don't work. Why? Because those activities destroy the human person. They don't build it up. Okay? What I want you guys to do is I want you to embrace the fact you want to be happy, and then I want to put a little sliver in your brain. What actually makes you happy? This question is at the source of all of Catholic moral and spiritual theology. What actually makes you happy? And what I'm going to argue next week is that what you truly want more than anything is God. And the reason why is because God is the only perfectly true, perfectly good, perfectly beautiful, perfectly powerful, all knowing, ever present, perfect reality that will make you perfectly happy. Everything else in this life, no matter how good they are, can never match with his perfection. And that we will only be perfectly happy in the next life. We can't have it in this life. Okay. So if that's true, if God's really out there and he's really the only thing that'll make us perfectly happy, then what's this life about? What this life's about is choosing those things that will get us closer to God. Okay. Choosing those things that get us closer to God. Sin, by definition, push us further away from God. Sins, by definition, harm the human person. They destroy the human person. Doing virtuous goods, pursuing truly good things will get you closer to God. They will get you closer to being happy, and they build up. That's the idea. So we're butting up against the end of our time. So let's kind of wrap up here. You were made to be happy. Embrace that wholeheartedly. You become happy when you pursue authentically good things. But those authentically good things in this life are always fleeting because they can't perfectly satisfy you. But there is something that can perfectly satisfy you, namely God. That's the takeaway from the lesson today. And so I want you guys to meditate this week, and you'll discuss in your groups. Meditate on the fact that God wants you to be happy. Meditate on the fact that God wants you to have a good life. And meditate on the fact that he wants you to be perfectly happy with him in heaven for all eternity. And then I want you to be at least open yourself up to the consideration that there are things that are actually good in this life that we should actually pursue, and there are things in this life that appear to be good, but they're truly not. And those things are called sins. And if we start to be able to tell the difference between the two, and we pursue true goods as opposed to fake ones, we will start living more happy lives in this life, and it'll keep us on track to be perfectly happy in the next. So, all right. Always try to keep these between 10 and 12 minutes. We're going to make it like usual. So I hope you guys have a blessed week. Meditate on those truths. Next time, we're going to talk about the beatific vision. Super cool stuff. So it should be a lot of fun. Between now and then, have a great week, fellas. Talk to you next time.